So I cut the wood last night thinking I would do a bowl. And where are we here, Clayton? Where do you want me to? Okay. We'll just look at it right here. And so this is an end grain piece. I cut it about 3 to 4 inches thick. And there's a reason I do that is I've been doing these end grain pieces and I used to try to get it thinner, getting more pieces. And I found that it really takes away any change in plans once you start turning. And when I cut this, I went, well, I don't want to do a bowl because the lobes kind of come in and these recesses in here are much deeper than I thought they were. So I'm going to do kind of a wall hanging, and which in essence is a very shallow bowl. But that thickness I like because it allows you to do all kinds of things. Flatten this piece out. The chainsaw, I just don't get perfect straight cuts with my chainsaw, no matter how well I try to sharpen it. After, I always get a cut going one way or the other. But there's a reason. That's the reason I do thicker pieces like this. And then it also allows, if I use a faceplate, I've got 1.5 inch screws in here. Faceplate's about 3/8 maybe. So you want enough material that you're going to turn it away. What I do with doing these kind of end grain pieces, I actually create a way to attach it by making tenons on both sides. So I put this on, and all I did was go for center mass in trying to balance this out as it I got a feeling, and this is why I hate seeing set screws that are left in faceplates, and this is my faceplate, so I left it in.
Well, you can't learn from perfect, right?
Well, I'm just, if I really get a lot of vibration, it's nice having a set screw in. And it is just one of those things that you have to remember it's there, because on these machines, people that didn't know that a faceplate was on, and you try taking it off, you can really mess up your threads by cranking those set screws back out over your threads. So the second I felt that resistance, I went, yep, set screws are in there. So, okay. So I like to, this is one of those things, I bring up my tailstock if I can do it for a while, and just for extra support. And always, before you start the machine, you can see that this thing, wide to thin, balance doesn't seem too bad, but there's a heavy side, so, okay. So typically, I would do the back side first. Oof. But I'm probably going to do the front on this. And again, I'm going off of vibration. I don't know how the mic is with face shield down, but bring my speed up, try to, and I don't even need to go up much further That's at 355. That right now, for how much this is out of balance, is fast enough for me. So I'm going to take this being end grain. I'm trying to flatten it out at this point so I can cut in either direction. And I've got enough material that I'm not worried about my bark at this point, keeping the bark on. And that's what a little faster. So 5/8 bull gouge, and I'm coming in. I always tell people I use my tool rest as something of a depth gauge. I know that these high spots, as I was doing this, were close to the rest. So I don't go in and put a big chunk of steel from my tool over the rest. I start out just slow, taking light cuts. Because you can't see those high spots coming around. But that's the thing where you saw the tool rest move, that inertia. This is a pretty good sized piece. And I've got my gouge open, tipped over, not at 45 degrees, but a little more open, pretty aggressive. Let's see what's going on. So you can see the high spot is where I'm going. But this is what I talk about. So coming out here, where your bark is, you can see, because of the direction of my cut, it's coming off. And it's coming off quite a bit, so I'm going to try coming in. It's a little sooner than I wanted to, but I think if I keep going in that direction, I won't have much bark left at all. So, but what I do for that, if I can do it at this point, I bring my gouge up, and now I got my bevel to the back to the wood, and then I'm listening for that where it stops making noise. Come in. Now I can start going forward. I don't know if you can see that. So you hear it, it stops. Now I start coming back the other direction, and that's where I'm going in. And that's one of those things, you can't see that one long high spot sticking out. And you can hear it, but you can't see it. So that's how I find it, is by putting the back of my bevel against there and moving in. Now in here, I'm not so worried about it because I'm into much more of a solid surface. I'll stop and show you what I mean by that. So out here, I'm just working on my ends, cutting in. You can see I'm starting to get a much cleaner cut on my bark now. I'm removing where it was torn off, a little bit left out here. But, so if I want bark on that edge, I've got to work going in. But, So it's kind of an intermittent surface out here, and you're getting into solid wood. It actually doesn't happen till you're way in quite a ways, but it's there for 80% of it, which makes it pretty easy to go in and make that cut. So when I'm doing these, what I talked about with working both sides of the wood is I'm actually going to create a tenon on both the front and the back. But you can see you actually remove material pretty quickly. So, but that whole thing about intermittent surfaces, you have to learn to just have good technique and be real slow in your cuts. Don't advance into the open air spots. So each time I'm getting a little more speed. I'm up over 500 now. And that is just because it becomes more and more in balance. Now that one, I believe, is actually going to be my tenon. Not used to a clean face shield. I actually couldn't see it. Okay, so now I'm starting to think about my, like I say, this is going to be the front facing out. So I'm thinking about my shape. I will create this so I can turn it around and do the backside so I can take out my screw holes and everything. Have to remember my screws go in approximately inch and a quarter. So should be pretty good with that. So I'll give it a little more of a curve. I like kind of an OG shape. So, and this is one of those things where you can tell if you're pushing against the wood. What you shouldn't be is the feeling of the wood hitting your tip should be it's pulling down. If you feel that you're going in and out, it means you're actually pushing into those air spaces. So you just kind of have to resist that urge to push. A little more. Okay, I like that. So I will. I didn't bring my 1/4-inch gouge along. So So with a tenon, I think it was a Mike Mahoney demonstration where, got to do one thing. Got to reduce this centerpiece because that's going to be in the middle of my jaws. I always leave it a little strong when I'm turning, so this live center it doesn't work in there. It doesn't get too weak. But now I want to reduce it so it isn't caught at the center point in your jaws. I know this is going to be big enough that it's opened up a little bit, but that's one of those things a lot of people don't kind of realize is if your jaws aren't tightening, what's happening, it's this little nub is actually getting caught in the center, and it doesn't allow you to get a good bite on with the jaws, the actual jaws. So. I do, for my face plates, I like sheet metal screws with the hex heads. I just, to me, they are, oh, let's see, where, there it is. I think I got those at Menards. Stainless. What? Why? Oh, I just, corrosion over time. Um,
Actually, when Clete gets home this afternoon, his wife is gonna have to go stand in the closet. During the football game.
Now you can, mark the long point out here if you would want, piece of tape, a pencil mark, even a magic marker on your tool rest. I still go back to feeling with the back of my gouge, but there is a lot of ways. I've done it myself where when there's one point that really, and this one actually is out a little further, half inch further than that one. So those that are really oddball lengths, it does kind of help to go in, put a piece of tape there or some kind of a mark that gives you just a point of reference on where it is. Because it is difficult when it's spinning and there's one that's really off, is you can't see it when that piece is turning. And it, I've already put my hand out and gotten whacked, so it's one of those that, you got to be aware all the time when you're turning. Now, I also am not going to have my tailstock here, so I can get it out of the way. And I always take out my live center so I don't run my elbow into it. And I have. It's surprising how many times I've done that over the years. It's just yeah, I'm just going to set it down, Clete. What's that? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Have you run your elbow into it? Someone actually learns from my mistakes. Most people have to find out for themselves. But, okay. So then one last thing I'm going to do, one last check to make sure I'm tight. Being soft wood, I don't really just want to crush it and kind of destroy it, but so now this is where a lot of times what I'm going to do is try to flatten a bit, and I'm actually going to cut in because this is the back side of this. But I'm going to leave as much mass here as I can and work these edges in more, because if you just keep taking away all your mass, it can actually start distorting, because you got to remember this is, I didn't look at this very well. I would have went back in and cleaned up these cuts a little bit. I see a few tool marks, not terrible, sandable. But there's a turner out, Pascal O'Day, Frenchman, does oak turnings. He says he's an oak turner, not a wood turner. And the reason he does oak is he does these pieces like 2 millimeters thick. And he'll do one even twice the size of this. And it's a race against time as he's turning. It's a great demonstration to see. And I hope to see him again one day because I learned more watching his demos than anyone else I think I've seen for this type of turning. But he's really going after it. Once he starts, he just keeps on. It's you can't stop and allow, because he gets it so thin, it's going to move. So he works, and that's where I learned is you work the edges, the imperfections first, take your time there. The mass supports those little ones. It's going to help as much as it can to keep it steady. Then you go after the mass and just get rid of it. But so white oak, yep. And it's the mandibulary rays that, so you've got your annular rings growing this way, and the mandibulary rays cross those. And that's why when he gets his piece done and it dries, he sandblasts it, and it looks like a lace, piece of lace. It's pretty amazing, really. And he does all different shapes. And I'll tell you what, I've seen a lot of people that say they turn thin, and then you see it and you go, it's not as thin as they were saying. His are actually as thin as he says. So, but. So that's one thing. The screws here, over time, those start to round over and they don't bite as well. So if your banjo or your tool rest keeps loosening as you're turning, sometimes all you have to do is take this out, and this one is doing it, and just put it against a grinder for a second to, at the base of that screw, there's a little bevel and an edge that cuts in as you tighten. And those probably need to be sharpened up a little bit. Yeah, this one's... I don't have a hone along. I may take a little more off and then put on a new gouge. You get, You got one here? Let's see if I can. And if you're gonna hone, let's see. Fine, medium. Before you use your hone, kind of take and clean the crud off of your gouge. Otherwise it clogs up your hone. See, if you use CBN wheels, I really tell you, you should do this also. They do. It doesn't take much. I would, if I was at home, I would have put a little spit on this hone, but it's not mine. So, let's see if it'll cut that now instead of turning it off. It's going to be a tough spot. Anybody have a pocket knife or a utility knife handy? I don't think I have. Oh, Jerry, I got my own hones here. Okay. There we go. Thank you. Swiss Army knife, always. Yeah, I don't think that's going to cut too well. Oh, well. Thank you. So. Thank you, Pete. So what I'm hoping is by cutting them off now, it'll stop peeling it off as I go further in. We'll see. So. Okay, here a little bit there yet. I'll move my rest in out on the outside edge. Gouge? Cutter and Son. It is. I've got, I think all the rest of the ones I've got with me are all Thompsons. I bought this in Phoenix when Carter and Son were just getting going. And I bought a 5/8 and a 1/2 inch, and they threw in the handles for free. They didn't have many people buying their tools at the time, and they really gave me a good deal on the tools, besides being it was a symposium. And that's what I buy most of my tools. I purchase at symposiums because you get a break on price. Exactly. Yep. Used to be you didn't, nobody charged tax in the old days and all. It's changed. But okay, back to, before I get ahead of myself. the thickness. See, it's a little deceiving to me because I got that branch coming up and it's sticking out further than the than where I want to cut here. Now I'm starting to get into the branch. Again, my pressure's down on the tool rest. It isn't trying not to push into the wood. I don't want to, let me see how thick that branch is here. Just starting to cut there. But I may bring this side down a little more so I keep that one. I kind of like it if I can do it. If I don't destroy it on this side. If I do, then I'll turn it away. Yeah, if I can, I'll leave that on, and I'll bring this side down to leave it, because it's a little short of this surface, a 1/4 inch below it. So, again, those are the kind of things that I like to try and do when I'm turning. If they don't turn out, they don't turn out. You know, if it gets broken and falls off, it's not a big deal to me. But it's fun to try and see if I can do it, if I can turn that and leave it in. It feels like it's breaking. You like that stuff, please? Okay. Yeah, I did. It cracked. So I'll probably take most of it off. Yeah. It'll turn away, I think. It's running at an angle, so it's going, the base of it's going to stay in there, and there just isn't much I can do about it now. I'm going to take a little more off of this so I don't have to have such an angle. No. So we're getting close on thickness. I like go a little thinner. I just want to see what I got left here. So I'm hearing this, but I think I can push it out of the way if I don't go all the way out to the end. And maybe leave some of it on. Lifting the bark off here in that same spot. Okay. So, and believe me, this is actually going very quickly. If I were doing this at home, I'd be probably half this far because I stop and I look and I think, I'm trying to get through this pretty quick. So I do. That's one of those things that when I go in the shop, I do not worry about. If I'm sanding, I worry about how much time I'm spending. But when I'm turning, I don't. I try to get into doing the piece. I don't care how long it takes me. It's one of those things that I go out there. I'm trying to enjoy what I'm doing, and you know, like say, the last thing I want to do is be in a hurry. I can see that branch, the very end. And I went inside of where I saw the end. Okay, now I'm starting to try and follow my profile that is on the top. Okay, now, so I'm happy with that thickness. Right about, I'm going to say 5/16. This one, uh-oh. You got to remember, end grain, your fibers are as thick as your wood, you know, and that's all that's holding it together. So any pressure on here, this piece will break right off. That's why if you're ever looking at somebody's work and you go in and you see an end grain piece, don't pick it up by the edges. Pick it up by the whole piece, kind of. But I can sand this to flatten it out. It is the only one that's thick. This branch did exactly what I thought. I came up, I went inside where the end was, and actually pushed it out to make this cut. And you can see where it affected the thickness on them. So these ends, a little bit on this one, they're moving. Very flexible. So. Oh yeah, it does, but it's still very fragile, and that is one that the bowls that got passed around. I did those before I sanded. I put on just a coat of lacquer, and hoping that it would stiffen up the wood a little more. Okay, now I can get rid of my mass. It's and kind of get down to how I'm going to fasten it. Just to be sure, I think all my screw holes, well, maybe not, maybe, I think they might be gone. Getting a little bit of tear out there. But the one thing I'm not going to do is I won't go out and touch these ends anymore. And because they will pretty much fall off at this point. Think. So you can do a recess or a tenon. It's one of those that you've got to ask yourself. I'm getting a lot of breakout on these edges from going fast. You know, I would probably put a, looks like pretty fresh blade in there though. But that's the kind of thing where if you got time, you can work at cutting these off and cleaning those up. I'm not going to bother with it now just because it's time consuming, and like I say, that's detail that I think you can see how to do it, you know, and go after if you want to. You can if you want. It's one of those things where, yeah, I have done it in the past. I tend to think it's just when it's fresh, it usually stays on much better than what it's doing this time. I think it's a little bit of me just going fast and trying to make fast cuts. But anything, if you think it'll help and you want to do it, sure. I don't. I'm one where, like say, it is one of those that if it helps you in the end, there's nothing wrong with doing any of those kind of little things that kind of assist you. Gluing bark on. I think, you know, the direction of your cut generally does it. I'm a little surprised at how much is actually breaking out right now, because my gouge is actually still pretty sharp. And but I was taking some pretty heavy cuts. So okay, so now I've got to think about how I am going to, what I want to do as far as I know the one thing I didn't bring along, I think, is I usually use a stick tape measure, and I didn't throw it in the box. Do we still have a small tape rule over here, Jerry? One right behind you. I'm going to grab it here. Four and a half. If I were to do a recess is actually as big as this center one. So I think I am going to just do a tenon, and I'll reverse it to take it off. So if you do a recess, to me, your piece ends up being thicker in the bottom Because your recess has to have a shoulder. You have to have a material that you can push your jaws out against. So I have dovetail jaws on my chuck, so I'm trying to dovetail this a little bit with my gouge. I could go in with parting tool and I think I've got enough taper on that. I was going to show you all one thing, one of my favorite new tools. And this is Carter & Son parting tool. And I'll tell you what, you wouldn't think parting tools could be, but I've used Firmiger parting tools and all kinds of them. And this one is just the nicest parting tool I have ever used. I love that thing. Yeah. It's one of those that you would think that simple of a tool, you know, they can't do anything different, but I'm telling you, it is just a really nice tool. You can pass it around. So, yep. So again, Mike Mahoney is one of those turners that I've probably learned a little more from over the years than most. And he's a production bull turner. Does very good demonstrations. And I don't know if you can see saw my tenon in the back was only 1/8 inch long. And he was the first one that ever said that about tenons not being, because it was not long after I had gone out and purchased tower jaws, which are 1.25 inches deep. And then I started making my tenons, of course, about 1.125 inches long. And Greg Kulbert, who was the first president down in the Nina group, said to me, he said, "What do you want that big chunk of wood on your piece for?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Now you've turned everything else thin, but you got that big chunk of tenon sitting on the back and your piece is trying to dry. And it's the dry wood against the wet wood." And he said, "It's fighting and cracking." And I said, "You know, you're right." Which then I saw the Mahoney demonstration, and he said, your tenons don't get stronger by making them longer. They get stronger by increasing the diameter. So getting bigger jaws and making your tenon, they can be very short. As long as you can grab a hold of it, it's just increasing that diameter will give you a much stronger tenon. All right. Wow. It's one of those things where, like I say, demonstrations and that type of thing, to me, I learn from. But oh yeah, yep, plenty. And he even does it. He'll do them even shorter than that. I don't have that much. It goes back to, are you getting catches when you're turning any longer? And the main thing there is just using your gouge right. Remember, you're always cutting with your gouge. You're cutting from center down. That's the supported side of your gouge. If your bevel's against the wood, that's where your support is. The support is underneath the cutting edge. This is the unsupported side of your tool, the top edge. So that's why we always say about turning at about a 45, and then the direction of your flute tells you the direction that you're going to be cutting. So you go in, and it's one of the keys to not getting catches. So instead of using this tool, when the gouge and the flute is pointed up at the ceiling, it's the most aggressive it can be. That whole cutting edge can come into wood. Tip it over, Now you're cutting from center down. Your unsupported side is pulled away from the wood, so that's the one that's going to catch on you, and you shouldn't be getting catches anymore. So, in theory, because every once in a while one sneaks up and gets you. You know, it's just I get more of them spindle turning than I do bowl turning anymore. And now, just because I don't remember doing it, I'm going to check my tightness. Yeah, a little loose. It's one of those things, like say, when I start and I'm going, okay, what did I tighten that up? Or in my head, I got that little checklist of things that I go through. But speed, everybody talks about speed all the time. This is running at 688. Plenty enough for me. I don't have to have that piece cranking at really high speeds. I make my cuts so the back of my bevel's against the wood. I'm actually forcing this piece onto the chuck. Now, like I say, I am one where before I take off that last piece, I want to make sure my thickness can come in. I don't know if I want to do that, but I would like to thin it down a little bit on the outside edges. So I'm going to come up. You can hear that it's a tick. That means that stuff has started moving, and there's a high spot. Remember to keep your bevel to get that little nub out of there so it doesn't lift. Okay. Not too bad. I don't, a little square right there. I'm going to try to sneak in a little bit of a shear scrape to see if I can't take that off. It's right here. It's a little bit square for me instead of round. I don't know if you can see that at all right in here, but let's soften it a little bit. I think any more I can do it with sanding. Okay. Yeah. What scraper? Because I have my gouge in my hand and it does just as good of a job. Really, I don't use, I've got scrapers. I've got some heavy, thick, big scrapers. I rarely use them. And my gouge, like I say, is always there, so I just use it. Um, yep. Yep. For me, if you're used to using a scraper, go for it. But for me, I got that gouge in my hand. I'll bet you 90% of the time I'm turning, that's the tool I'm using, and it is just, it's what I am it's what is my favorite tool to use. So this is part of my um, vacuum system, and I just like it for um, reverse chucking. And now I can just bring this up. I'll bring the tailstock up and turn it. This thing is really fragile. Now, because of the thickness of that tenon, I could leave it on there if I wanted, but I'm gonna go for it and try to turn it off just to show you what it is doing it. And now, the thing with this is it is very fragile. You can't put much pressure on from the tailstock because it'll push right through it. If I can. Actually, so am I. So I can see it start to flex, so I'm going to live with it right there. I normally have a 1/4 inch bowl gouge that I use on every piece I do. And I forgot to throw it in my bag. Although, in my traveling tools, now that I think about it, and the reason I like 1/4 inch, when I take all my tenons off with a 1/4 inch, I forgot, I got my traveling, this is my bag. I keep these set of tools in there all the time. And I like 1/4 inch because they take a lighter cut. And you get down to this point of turning your piece, you don't want to be real aggressive and break things. So you can see that's running a little bit out of round. but it doesn't matter because this is the back side. You aren't going to see anything. So you come in. I just heard a little crack, so I'm going to sand that nub off rather than trying to take it off. So pass it around. Like I say, that center I would sand, almost hold it from the center underneath as you pass around because, yeah, if you grab the lobes, they'll break off.